Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 19th of August of 2024. Today we have a lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about New York. And according to information we have, New York has fallen. This information was confirmed by different mappers, by pro-neutral mappers. This information was also confirmed by pro-Ukrainian mappers, but yet we haven't received anything that can confirm this. We've been waiting for any report from the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation that can give us additional information about the situation in this area, but we haven't received anything. We're not saying that the Russians haven't established complete control over New York, but most likely there is still a lot of job to do, because according to information we have, according to pro-Ukrainian mappers, the Russians managed to break through the Ukrainian defense belt and to enter the city and the village of Nilipovka in the northern part of New York. And according to pro-Ukrainian mappers, the Russians haven't entered the citadel of New York. We are talking about the industrial zone, and that there are still Ukrainian soldiers. We don't know for sure whether the Ukrainians managed to escape the encirclement or not. Maybe the Ukrainians are planning to begin the breakthrough this upcoming night. We don't know for sure. But obviously this upcoming night from the 19th of August on the 20th of August is going to be very difficult, exactly especially for the Ukrainians who are currently located in the industrial zone. Most likely the Ukrainians will conduct some deblocking operation with the purpose to maintain the evacuation road. So let's see and let's wait what is going to be next. But once again, the upcoming night is going to be very difficult. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Pokrovsk direction. During the previous 24 hours we got additional updates about the changes on the ground. And first let's talk about the area between the villages of Tikha, Kalinovo, Skuchna and Mezhova. We have a lot of updates on the ground. We have a lot of changes on the ground according to different mappers. The Ukrainians decided to evacuate their soldiers, their personnel from this artillery pocket towards the village of Kalinovo. Furthermore, the Ukrainians haven't managed to establish or create more or less reliable defense base in the vicinity of Kamyshivka, and according to information we have, the Ukrainians are withdrawing their positions towards Kalinovo as well. So most likely the same story took place in the vicinity of Zavitne and the village of Tikha. So summarizing everything, we can make a conclusion that Ukrainians are trying to create the next defense belt along M30 road between the village of Mikhailovka, the village of Memryk, and the village of Kalinovo and Karlovka and Karlovka water reservoir. I'm not sure that Ukrainians are able to hold their lines for a very long period of time, and most likely they will be forced to fall back from this direction as well, because the Russians have established complete FPV drone control over the territory. During the previous day we got additional batch of videos of how the Russians were destroying Ukrainian vehicles, Ukrainian equipment, and the most important, Ukrainian communication equipment. In this video we can see a series of FPV drone strikes all over the entire Pakrovsk direction, and as a result of these attacks the Russians managed to suppress Ukrainian communication between the groups, and obviously this led to significant problems. Now let's talk about the western flank, about the city of Novohrodivka and Selydove. The Russians stopped. As you can see, we haven't received any updates about any additional Russian progress in the city of Krasny Yar and Grodovka for the previous 5 days. So which confirms either the Russians are not planning to move further in the direction of the central part of the village, or the Ukrainians managed to stabilize the lines in this direction. So most likely the Russians, at least at this stage of the special military operation, at this stage of the Pokrovsk offensive operation, they don't need to attack in this direction, or there are very heavy clashes exactly inside of the village, and we still haven't received anything because both sides, the Russians and the Ukrainians, are trying to keep some silence from this direction. Now let's talk about Novohrodivka. According to information we have, as a result of clashes, the Russians secured the area in the vicinity of Zhiravka and captured the village of Krutoy Yar and reached the western outskirts of this village. But as we can see, the Russians stopped right in front of the Terikon in the landfill of the coal mine Novohrodivka number 3. As for Novohrodivka itself, we got just one geolocation from the eastern outskirts of this city, and in this video we can see how the Ukrainians tried to attack the Russian forces in Orlovka, and the Russians discovered this tank, and as a result of FPV drone strike, this tank was destroyed. According to different mappers, we have completely different picture on the ground. The pro-Ukrainian mappers and neutral mappers haven't adjusted their maps, let's say, further in the western direction. So the line, according to pro-Ukrainian and according to neutral mappers, is this one. So nothing changed since the beginning during the previous day. But as for the pro-Russian sources, during the previous 24 hours, according to them, the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly. And basically the Russians captured the tree lines, the fortifications, and Ukrainian defense belt right in front of the city itself. So according, once again, summarizing everything, according to pro-Russian sources, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians captured these fields. So this stronghold was captured, additional positions along the railways, this stronghold was captured, and so on. And we have some changes on the ground according to different pro-Russian sources. Some Ukrainian sources reported about heavy clashes already on the territory of the city. For now, we can't confirm whether this information is correct or not, because as for geolocations, as for videos, we haven't received anything that can confirm any clashes on the territory of the city. We just have this video, and according to this video, according to the author of this video, he's saying that there are very heavy clashes right now, but if you take a look at this picture, it reminds me at least the aviation strike or maybe mortar strike or the attack of multiple round rocket system, but not the close combat between forces. So, but the volunteers on the ground, the people who are trying to help, let's say, civilians to evacuate or to bring some water or to bring some food, start spreading this information that the Russians have already entered the territory of Novohrodivka, probably with a reason. They try to force people to evacuate from the city. According to information we have, there are still 54,000 people in the Pokrovsk agglomeration. And of course, this is a very big barrier either for the Russian and for Ukrainian side. The Ukrainians don't want to attack the civilians, they don't want to attack the residential area. Furthermore, these civilians can somehow provide additional information to the Russians, to navigate them, to give them, to provide them coordinates of the temporary deployment points. So it's very important to enforce the evacuation process as much as possible. So most likely this is the reason why the volunteers on the ground began spreading the information about the Russian presence inside of the city. They just tried to make the evacuation as fast as possible, to complete the evacuation as fast as possible. Anyway, summarizing everything, we can see that according to pro-Russian sources, they managed to reach the first line of attack in front of Novohrodivka itself, but yet haven't entered the territory of the city. Now let's talk about the southern flank, about Selydove. The second day in a row, the Russian sources published the video of how they were FPV droning and attacking the Ukrainian positions on the Terikon itself. In this video we can see another FPV drone attack on the Ukrainian equipment, some positions on the hill on the top of this landfill. And if we increase the numbers of updates for 2 days, we're gonna see that this is not the first video from the same area. The Russians published yesterday another batch of videos of scenes of how they were attacking the Ukrainian forces on the top of the landfill. These two videos confirm that most likely currently the coal mine by the name of Russia and the landfill of Russia is the primary target for the armed forces of Russian Federation. They try to capture this territory most likely in the very near future, and this will allow the Russians to understand whether they are able to move through this defense belt or not, or they will be forced to waste additional time for this. Lots of military experts began building different arrows, making different projections what the Russians are planning to do next. And according to very reliable military experts, the Russians in the next, let's say, few days, a few weeks, are planning to move further in the southern direction towards the village of Kurachovka. So according to them, first the Russians will try to capture all these villages like Karlovka, like Kurachovka, like Girnik, Zhelana Pershe, which will allow the Russians to establish complete control over everything that located, let's say, to the right of in this cloud that we're trying to add right now on map. So according to different military experts, this is exactly what the Russians are planning to establish control over during the next few weeks. So if you ask my opinion, I believe that currently the Russians are planning to conduct both operations. Some Russian forces are going to move further in the southern direction with the purpose to force the Ukrainians to fall back towards the village of Kurakhova. This will allow the Russians to establish complete control over these fields and to finish the battle for Krasnogorovka, Georgievka, Gostre, Maximilianovka, and so on. On the other side, the Russians will continue storming the Ukrainian positions in Selydove, Novohrodivka, Grodovka itself. But as we discussed, this is a wall. This is the wall with the terracones in the landfields, and obviously this is one of the strongest defense belt that the Russians have ever met since the beginning of the special military operation. So most likely the Russians will be forced to wait some time to crack this nut. Meanwhile, the other Russian forces will continue moving in the southern direction. Now let's move to the South Donetsk direction. We have additional updates. According to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the vicinity along the TO524 road and to move further in the western direction. So simply saying, the Russians got additional 150 meters. As for the village of Konstantinovka, during the previous 24 hours we haven't received anything important, just regular videos of how the Russians were FPV droning the Ukrainians on the territory of this village without any changes on the ground. But the Ukrainian sources are saying that during the previous 24 hours, the Russians were trying to improve their positions along this road, trying to attack the Ukrainian positions in the southwestern part of the village or of the ruins that left from this village. So we can understand this Russian maneuver, because if the Russians are able to take under control these positions with a stronghold in between the tree lines, then the Russians will be able to cut the last supply roads that goes from Katerinovka and Antonovka towards the village of Konstantinovka. So this approximately the things that the Russians are trying to make right now, not with the forces of regular army, mainly with the use of the sabotage and reconnaissance group. Now let's move back a little bit and let's talk about the Siversk direction. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the railway station by the name of Vyimka. So we are talking about this small railway station. This is it. And based on this report, we have adjusted the map according to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation. And this is very important strategical position, because the clashes for this territory have been taking place for previous 3 or 4 months. And just now the Russians managed to take under control a very small part of the territories, as you can see. But despite the fact that they managed to capture just a small part of the railways, they managed to capture the most important part. And now the Russians in the vicinity of this railway station by the name of Vyivka are located on the same level with the Ukrainian forces, who are located further in the northern direction to the city of Siversk. And now most likely the Russians will speed up their offensive operation, and they were gonna move much faster along the same railways towards the city of Siversk. So this direction was on a very long operational pause due to the problems along the line of combat contact. The Russians had a lot of problems in Sporny, in Ivanodarivka, in Vyimka, in Fyodorovka, in Bilogorovka, in Verkhnyokamyansk. So telling the truth, we can say that this is one of the most well fortified positions of the armored forces of Ukraine, and now we see that the situation is turning in Russian favor, and most likely the Russians have already moved through the turning point, and now it's just the time when the Russians will get additional progress and will getting closer and closer to the city of Siversk. Now let's move further and let's talk about the northern Kupyansk direction. We have some changes on the ground. According to information we have and according to different mappers, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly to the west of Pyshane. The Russians captured additional tree lines, the fortifications, and they managed to reduce the distance between their edge positions and the Oskol River itself. So if we calculate the distance between the edge Russian positions and the city of Glushkovka is already less than 4 kilometers. The distance between the edge Russian positions in Pischane and Kalishnikovka itself is less than 4 kilometers as well, and the distance between edge Russian positions in Pischane and the city of Kruglyakivka or the village of Kruglyakivka is also a little bit less than 5 kilometers. The length of Russian front line in this direction is already around 5 kilometers, and this is enough to begin offensive operation, full-scale offensive operation, with the purpose to cut this territory in two as a result of fast lightning, very well armored vehicle attack. Most likely this is exactly what the Russians are planning to conduct in the very near future. According to information we have, the Ukrainians have already announced the evacuation of their forces of 115th Separate Brigade and the 143rd Separate Brigade of the Armored Forces of Ukraine. The Ukrainians abandoned their positions exactly in this area, and they moved on the Ukrainian side of Oskol River, and now the Ukrainians are trying to prepare their defense positions in the vicinity of Sinkova. So let's wait for additional updates, but most likely very soon something big is going to happen in this direction as well. Now let's move to the Kharkiv area. During the previous 24 hours, according to pro-Russian mappers, the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly on the line between this village of Gluboka and Liptsy itself. So according to pro-Russian bloggers, military experts, the Russians captured additional block of the residential area to the north of Liptsy, and the Russians are moving further in the southern direction. Currently we see the Ukrainians can't show any resistance because most of the main reinforcements and reserves from this area were redeployed to the Kursk direction. As for the Kursk direction, the Ukrainians continue offensive operation, and the most important updates are coming from the Glushkova district. Once again, let's add the river, the same river. This is the pain, and this is the biggest pain for the Russian armed forces in this direction, because from now on, from the 19th of August of 2024, everything that located below this blue line is already cut from the mainland. During the previous few days, the Ukrainians and the Russians published the video how they destroyed the bridge in the vicinity of Glushkova. It was 2 days ago. Yesterday we got the videos and reports how the Ukrainians destroyed the bridge to the north of Zvanne. Let's take a look at this video. In this video, once again, we can see the attack of most likely of Ukraine aircraft, and the bridge was destroyed completely. And by the morning of the 19th of August, there was just one bridge left that the Russians could use for evacuation rotation, and we're talking about the bridge in the village of Karish. But this morning, not morning, but at noon time, somewhere at 1 p.m. of the local time, the Ukrainian sources reported that the Ukrainians destroyed the third bridge across the same river. So from now on, there are no more bridges in this area. The Russians during the previous days managed to establish significant number of pontoon bridges to support their forces in this area, and today we got additional updates about these pontoon bridges. So for example, this is the satellite photo with a very good quality that was published by the Ukrainians. In this photo we can see the satellite picture of the bridge, according at least to pro-Ukrainian sources. And later the Ukrainian sources published additional satellite picture of the same area. Let's take a look at this video. It's not a picture, this is the video. And the Ukrainians are saying that between the 16th and the 18th of August, some changes were discovered in this bridge. As you can see, the bridge changed its direction, or as if something happened with the bridge. And the Ukrainian military experts are making conclusion that most likely this pontoon bridge was also destroyed as a result of Ukrainian attack. So now we see the Ukrainians are trying to follow the river, trying to discover the Russian pontoon bridges and to destroy them as soon as it's possible. Furthermore, the Ukrainians continue bombing and attacking the Russian forces inside of Tyotkina. So the Ukrainians began the real artillery preparation before the real full-scale offensive operation on the ground. Currently, we don't know for sure the exact number of Russian forces in this direction, but most likely the Russians are planning to give a battle. The Russians most likely have redeployed the most experienced and powerful forces, and they will try to hold this line as long as possible, because as for the Kursk offensive operation, now we can talk about three phases of this operation. The first phase was to establish complete control over Sudzha. The first phase also include the control over Koreeva, but the Ukrainians haven't managed to achieve this goal. And this is the first stage. On this line, the first stage ended. Now we're talking about the second phase of the Ukrainian Kursk offensive, and as a result of the second phase, the Ukrainians are planning to establish control over every single city and village that located to the south of Glushkova. So let's add some polygon on map for better understanding. So this is the approximately the second, let's say, stage of the Kursk offensive operation conducted by the armed forces of Ukraine, so to establish complete control over these territories. And as soon as the Ukrainians are able to complete this stage, they will begin the third and most likely the final stage of the Kursk offensive operation, and we are talking about attack towards the city of Siversk. In this case, the Ukrainians will try to attack from Glushkova to the north, and after the end of the second stage, most likely the Ukrainians will begin offensive on the line Glukhov, Kupyansk and Rilsk as well. So as a result of the third stage, the Ukrainians most likely will try to capture this block as well. So this is approximately the plans of armed forces of Ukraine for the next 1-2 months. Obviously, by the end, but somewhere in this middle of September, the Ukrainians are planning to take under control this territory, and by the middle of October, the Ukrainians are planning to get on the border of Rilsk. I'm not sure that Ukrainians are able to do this, but they will try to make everything they can to complete this mission. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.